So my name's Sean Datchik. This is Hawkeye teachers or special education teachers. Myself, Ashley Ryla. Um, so here's our contact information, phone number. If you're on Twitter, we have University of Iowa Special Ed. And then here's my own Twitter. And this is what we got going on. So I'll drop this link in the chat real quick. So this link is going to be for, it will talk about some of our endorsement and degree options and classes. Also, if you have a smartphone, if you just hold the camera app over this QR code, that it'll appear on your phone as well. So we're going to talk about who is a special educator, what special educators do, different degrees, endorsements, and courses we offer here at the University of Iowa. And we'll specifically look at if you're interested in pursuing a bachelor's with an added endorsement. We have this new thing that just popped up, undergrad to grad, to where you can get a graduate or an undergrad degree in 4 years, and then just one additional year, you actually would get a graduate master's degree in special ed. We have a master's degree with endorsement, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. So just as a quick introduction, so myself, Sean Datchik, this is my 6th year here at the University of Iowa. Before coming here, I was a special education teacher and a special ed director for elementary, middle, and high school. I work primarily in New Orleans, Louisiana. Still love it down there. So right now, I'm just excited to be working with undergrad and graduate students who are interested in special education. And I primarily teach academic intervention classes here. So for those of you who might be student teaching or have practicum courses, if you have students in there with disabilities, I primarily look at different instructional techniques to help them succeed in writing primarily, but then also mathematics, and you could use it for reading as well. Ashley, would you mind sort of introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi guys, my name is Ashley Ryla. I just graduated with my PhD from the special education department here at the University of Iowa. And I currently serve as a postdoctoral research scholar, and I work most directly with Allison Brune. I'm currently teaching classroom management for elementary ed majors, as well as characteristics of disabilities. And they're both fascinating courses, so I would encourage you to take them. Preceding my doctoral program, I received my master's degree through the university, and I was a high school special education teacher, and I worked with students 9th through 12th grade, and I managed their IEPs and kind of coordinated all of their education efforts. I've also between my high school teaching position, as well as coming back into academia, I worked at the UI Reach program, which is at South Lindquist, and I was a program specialist there, advised students and taught classes, and just worked within that setting. And then preceding my master's work, I also worked with at Systems Unlimited, where I worked with adults with disabilities within their day hab program, and so I coached individuals like with job skills. So it's a little bit about myself.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks, Ashley.
Yeah.
So we're a part of the special education program. We're within the Department of Teaching and Learning and the College of Ed here. We have 3 different types of degrees. So we have an undergrad, bachelor's, where you can get the added endorsement in special ed. We also have a master's degree in special education, and we also have a doctorate. Ashley's one of our esteemed graduates. We also have different endorsements. So some of this language can get kind of confusing and used interchangeably sometimes. But basically, the degree is from the university, and it says, okay, you, let's say, have a bachelor's. The endorsements link up to the state requirements. So state in Iowa, there's 3 different endorsements that we offer. So basically, you could get a bachelor's, and then you could choose one of these endorsements. One would be K-8. So that would enable you to teach kindergarten through 8th grade, and that's Strategist 1 or Strat 1. We have 5-12. So that would be teaching grades 5 through 12, Strat 1. And then we have a K-12. So you can teach elementary, middle, and high school. That's the one that I have myself. and that's Strat 2. We'll talk some more about what those different endorsements mean. We also have a certificate in applied behavior analysis. So basically what I'd like you to think about there is if you have a student with some pretty challenging academic difficulties and behavioral difficulties, applied behavior analysis is one of the cutting edge fields of study that can people learn about. Ashley's getting she's becoming a board certified behavior analyst. So she can talk a little bit about this, but that's designed for sort of more intensive intervention. And so we're really happy to offer that certificate. That's something that was just new this year. And myself and Ashley are two members of a team. So there's Allison Brune, Lisa Didion, Seth King, Deborah Reed, and Pam Reese as well. And so up next is we're going to talk a little bit about who is a special educator. So Ashley, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and go on to the next slide. So when we look at the statistics across who actually, like what kind of students are receiving special education services, the chart that we see on the screen gives you an estimate as to how many individuals ages 3 through 21 who have been identified with a learning disability on the autism spectrum disorder or a hearing impairment, for example. And so if we look at the largest category within the disability categories for students is who are served or receiving special education services, this would be learning disabilities. And so we're seeing about 2.3 million school-age children being identified and being served through special education services underneath that identity. And that equates to approximately 4.7% of all students within our K-12 setting. So when we add up all of these numbers, this approximates to approximately 10 to 14% of all students within the K-12 setting receiving special education services. And so what that means is we have a large percentage of our students within the K-12 setting that are receiving special education services. And so we need well prepared special education teachers within these settings. And then on this screen now, we see where students are actually spending most of their time within the school day. And that top line, let me orient you to the graph. On the y-axis, we have the percentage of students with receiving special education services. And then on the bottom x-axis is the number, like the years from 2000 all the way up to 2018. And so that top line indicates on average about 80% of students within special education are spending about 80% of their time within general education classrooms or within general education settings. And then when we look at that dash line, the one that's just below that, there's about a range between 40 and 70% of individuals are spending their time within general education classrooms. And then that bottom one is less than 40% of their time within general education settings. And so what this graph is essentially depicting is that majority of kiddos that are receiving special education services are getting most of their education within general education settings. And so essentially what that means is you as Hawkeye teachers are essentially special education teachers. If that graph was a little bit difficult to kind of interpret, here's some numbers to kind of let that sink in. So about 64% of individuals who are receiving special education services, they're spending 100% down to 80% of their time within your classrooms, your future classrooms. 18% are spending about 79 to 40% of their time within general education settings. And then lastly, 13% are spending 39% or less of their time within general education settings. And if you're familiar with this triangle that we talk a lot about in our education world, we can kind of put that into that triangle. So majority of the students are in that green level. They're receiving most of their services within general education settings. And then those percentages just get smaller and smaller to make up that entire triangle. And so this really means that we really need everyone to have a really good, strong foundation in special education services. And remember that special education is not a place. It's not a classroom. It's not a building. It's really a series of supports, a series of adaptations and related services that are delivered across settings, within general education settings, within what we might think of as more of like resource room or special education rooms. So now we're going to look at, what do special educators do? Well, special educators are special education teachers. Whether you are hired as a special education teacher or a general education teacher, you are a special ed teacher. And so what does that mean? That means you, regardless if you're in a predominantly education setting, gen ed setting, or predominantly a special educated setting, you are going to be taking a part of the individualized education program, otherwise known as IEPs. You'll be writing them, managing them, progress monitoring them, making sure that students are actually meeting their goals, and it might be delivering what we call progress monitoring probes, and scoring them and then putting them on a graph. Paraprofessional management is a big part of being a special educator. If you are hired as a special ed teacher specifically, you would be managing a lot of their schedules and identifying where they go within the school day. And then within the general education setting, a general ed teacher definitely has to manage those paraeducators within their classroom, identifying what they need to be working on, how they can be supporting students within that classroom. Special education teachers teach specially designed instruction. This can be delivered within the general education setting, within more of a restrictive special education setting, within small group settings, or even one-on-one. And specially designed instruction is going to be specific instruction and strategies that are tailored specifically to meet that individual's learning needs. And most importantly, special educators advocate for special education needs. How can we give the student services that where we can have them meet their maximum potential within whatever setting they're in? If you aren't in the traditional K-12 classroom as a general education teacher or a special education teacher, those who have a training within special education can become special education consultants. And oftentimes, at least within Iowa, for example, that might be getting a job through the area education agency. And as a special education consultant, you would predominantly be tasked with evaluating special education programs, as well as all of the IEPs that are underneath within that school or within your region. And I think probably the best way to categorize that job is problem solving, helping teachers identify what kind of interventions, what kind of supports need to be in place within that within the education setting, so that student or group of students can meet their educational needs and meet their goals. You might recommend strategies. And I think that as a special education as a whole, if you have a background in it, opens so many doors. Here's just a list of some jobs that you might potentially be able to achieve or get by having a really good, strong foundation within special education. Think of being an administrator. I don't have statistics here, but I know that if you have aspirations to be an administrator, whether that's a principal or even a superintendent, or you want to work at the district level in some capacity, you're more likely to get hired if you have some education and background within special education services. You can become a researcher. Sean and I are both researchers. So if you have aspirations to continue on learning about this field, there are so many possibilities about how you can expand our field and do research. If behavior really sparks your interest, or reading sparks your interest, you can specialize in those fields and become a reading specialist within a school, for example. And so those are just some examples. The things that have that asterisk at the end just are likely going to be some positions where you're going to need further education past what we're talking about here in this presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. To recap, so special education, we tend to think of it, and the field as a whole tends to think of it as a series of supports and adaptations, and not a place. The figure that Ashley was talking about here in terms of students. Vast majority, this line's only increasing since 2000, where it's approaching, between 60 and 70%. 60 and 70% of students with disabilities are going to spend the vast majority of their day within general education classrooms. So what that means is, if you're here, if you're a University of Iowa student, we do have different degrees available that you might be interested, different endorsements. And even if you're like, no, I actually am not that interested in getting a degree or endorsement, there's our courses are open to anybody at the University of Iowa who's in the teacher education program. So let's take a look at some of those right now. So as I said before, we have a bachelor's in elementary education, with an added endorsement in special education. If you happen to be a secondary education major here, just reach out to me and maybe we could figure out some sort of individualized program. But our traditional track is bachelor's in elementary ed, and then you can get an added endorsement in special ed. We also have a master's in special education, and these 3 endorsements. Strategist 1, in the state of Iowa, that's looked at as a mild to moderate. So what that means is that as a teacher, if you have a Strategist 1 endorsement, you would typically be working with students who have more mild to moderate disabilities. So they might have some academic difficulty, they might have some behavioral difficulty, but you wouldn't really be working with students with more severe disability. So for example, I have a friend who is who has a license for moderate to severe or profound disabilities in the state of Pennsylvania. And so she works in a life skills classroom for students in elementary and middle school who need more intensive supports for such things as personal hygiene or daily living skills. So that is what those endorsements would not be. This would be, again, for more mild to moderate academic or behavioral difficulties. This Strategist 1 is the same here for 512. You just are certified for different grade levels. And then we have Strategist 2, which would be learning disabilities and behavior disorders. So that's where you would learn some more techniques really based in our applied behavior analysis certificate program that will allow you to help a little bit better students with behavior disorders. And that's for K-12. And then we also have the certificate. So this is not a degree in applied behavior analysis or an endorsement. It's a certificate program that would allow you to become a nationally certified behavior analyst if you're interested. And here are all the courses. So we have quite a few. Many of these are actually a part of your programs of study already if you're in the teacher education program. So I know many people take assessment, instructional planning and practice, the same with foundations of special education. So that's probably been most of y'all's experience with our courses. Outside of that, we actually have quite a few other ones as well. So we have special education literacy designed to help you provide instruction for students with disabilities or such things as dyslexia. We have behavioral and social intervention, so to craft individualized behavior programs. We have academic skills for students with special needs. So that's more of the differentiation piece, the accommodations and modifications. We work on that. We also have explicit instruction. So that teaches you how to create rather intensive instructional lessons if you have students with disabilities in your classroom who are struggling. So those are some things you could try. We also have foundations of applied behavior analysis, advanced applied behavior analysis. We have single subject research design. So that is designed for people who you're in the classroom, you're trying to figure out what's working. And you would apply different research techniques to figure out some of those problems. And then we also have ethics and ABA. And then we also have our own practicum in student teaching. And so all these classes are designed to help you learn special education law, the different disability categories, techniques to collaborate with parents or guardians, evidence-based instruction, assessment, behavioral intervention, and a lot more. And so those are the degrees, endorsements, and courses. And the first thing that all those are sort of wrapped up with a ribbon in a nice present is bachelor's with added endorsement. So how long is this? It typically takes about 4 to 5 years. You would get a BA or a bachelor's in elementary education, and then you would get an added endorsement. So not only could you teach elementary education, but then you would also be able to be a certified special education teacher. So that would give you the option to be a general education teacher where you would have your own typical elementary classroom, or you would also have the option to teach in a resource room to where students would receive pull-out services. Like, let's say you have a student that struggles with reading and they have 3 intervention sessions on reading instruction a week. they would come to your classroom, you would provide one-on-one instruction or small group, and then you would help support them in their general education classroom. So it gives you more flexibility on the different types of options, different types of students to work with. What's required? So you would complete all your elementary education courses, and then we tack on 9 special education classes, including student teaching. The student teaching, it happens during your typical student teaching. So you would actually do 8 weeks of elementary ed student teaching. And then that second half, 8 weeks, you would be placed with a special education teacher in resource room, and then also push in or inclusion services. And the courses are special ed classes are spread across your degree, so 1 or 2 courses a year. So here would be the classes. So the assessment, you have practicum, and then some of the other classes we talked about earlier. So like special education literacy, and then you would end it with student teaching, 8 weeks in the elementary classroom, 8 weeks in the special education classroom. So that's the first option. That's by far our most popular option. We typically have about 10 students a year who choose that option. A new degree option that we have is undergrad to grad, or U2G. And how long is that? Well, that's 5 years. So it's actually pretty much the same as this option, where bachelor's without endorsement typically takes people 4 to 5 years. The undergrad to grad, about 5 years. So you have 4 undergrad, 1 grad. The benefit behind this is that you would end up with the bachelor's, and then you would be able to earn a master's in that year. So we would integrate our courses during your undergrad, and then have it designed to where you could wrap up a master's degree in a year. And what's required? All elementary education courses, and there would be 11 SPED classes. So if you notice a difference here, you have 9 for just the added endorsement. So there are a couple additional classes to get the master's. The way that we have it spread out, though, is the courses would occur across your 5 years, and that last year is really all your SPED classes plus student teaching. So the courses here highlighted in yellow are the ones that you would take your final year with us. So you have the 4 years of your typical classes. These classes in white would be spread across those 4 years. And then that 5th year would be, you would have the fall semester of classes with the practicum. And then the last semester of your 5th year, you would have your student teaching. And same setup as this other option, to where you would be doing student teaching in elementary the first 8 weeks, and then special education the second 8 weeks. The one benefit again here is that you would have a master's at the end on this. And so this is what it could potentially look like. So here would be fall and spring of your 4th year. If you all are past the 4 years, that's completely fine. This is just meant to be representative of if you're approaching near the end of your undergrad, that final year. So you would have fall, spring, and then right here where it's in bold, that's when you would start to shift and almost be double dipping, so to speak, and that these classes would count towards your undergrad, but then also fulfill requirements for your master's degree. So really this last semester here of your traditional undergrad would be a split. And then you'd have a full 5th year of earning graduate credit. If you notice, there's no student teaching here at the end of the 4th year. That's because we actually shifted all your student teaching to the final year of your program, if you're interested in this option. So in other words, you would earn your bachelor's here, and then we would just have you do the 1 student teaching rather than doing 2 student teachings. Student teaching in your 4th year, and then student teaching. Some of you all might be student teaching now. Some of you all might have friends or roommates who are student teaching. It can be a beast. So I don't think there's a reason for you to do 2 of them. Let's just put them together and then have it occur at the end. And then the last option we have is a master's with endorsement. So for those of y'all who are interested, who say, okay, yeah, I'm going to have students with disabilities in my class, and I want to take advantage of learning some evidence-based techniques, special education law characteristics, what have you, but you might not have enough time to fit this in with where you're at. That's okay. We also offer master's degrees. So this is where you don't have to take any classes as an undergrad. This would be added on after. With a master's, it typically takes 2 to 3 years, and that's with you doing part-time, close to full-time. Actually, the 99% of our current master students work during the day as either teachers, K-12 teachers, or paraprofessionals. So the vast majority of our master classes happen once a week in the evening. So it does make for some long days. I'm not going to lie, definitely see some teachers coming straight from school with like Chipotle, and they just sort of set it there and, they make it work. But so it would take about 2 to 3 years, and you would have a master's. If you already have a teaching degree, you could get one of these. So you could get the Strat 1 K8, Strat 1 512. If this is your very first teaching degree and you're coming from an undergrad that wasn't teaching, like myself, I actually have a bachelor's in psychology. And then I was like, oh, I actually want to be a special ed teacher. So since I didn't have that initial teaching license, I got a master's with this in K-12. And what's required? 32 credit hours. So when you think about going full-time or part-time, you're just basically spacing out those 32 hours. And there's 11 special education classes plus a semester of student teaching. And the courses highlighted in yellow here actually would contribute to a certificate in applied behavior analysis. So in other words, if you take some of these classes as a master student, that would put you on the path to also receiving a certificate in applied behavior analysis. And that really fits with the spirit on Strat 2 being having a focus on helping students with behavior disorders. And then here would be the other. So this actually would bleed over into here. And then there would only be 2 additional classes to earn that ABA certificate. So if you were to take these classes, there would actually be only 2 additional ones to where you'd actually have the master's and then also a applied behavior analysis certificate. So that's all we had for today. I'm going to go ahead and